there is a specific moment that follows a failure, not the moment of the failure itself, after it. When the dust settles and you are standing in the rubble of whatever you just did or didn't do, and the full weight of it arrives. You said you wouldn't, then you did. You knew better. You did it anyway. You had one chance to be who you said you were, and you weren't that moment. You know it. This is the story of three men who failed. Not minor failures, the kind that can be dismissed or explained away. The serious kind. The kind that changes how you see yourself. The kind that makes you wonder if what you thought you were capable of, integrity, courage, obedience, was ever really there. Their names were Peter, Jonah, David. And what happened after the failure is the part worth watching. Peter. He had said it with certainty. Even if everyone else falls away, I will not. He said it to Jesus' face. He meant it. He was not performing bravery he didn't feel. Hours later, in a courtyard outside a trial where the man he'd just sworn to defend was being condemned, a servant girl asked him, "You were with him, weren't you?" He said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She asked again. He denied again. A third time, someone recognized his accent. "You must have been with him. Your accent gives you away." And Peter said, "I don't know the man." Three denials, each one a little louder than the last. The rooster crowed, and Peter remembered. He went out and wept, not the polite kind of tears, but the kind that come from realizing you are capable of exactly what you were most certain you weren't. What made Peter's failure so specific and so painful was not just the act, it was the gap between who he had declared himself to be and who he actually was when it cost something. That gap is not Peter's alone. Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh. Jonah went to Joppa and booked a ship heading in the opposite direction. He didn't accidentally wander off course. He didn't misunderstand the instructions. He heard them clearly, understood them completely, and went the other way. The storm that followed was violent enough that experienced sailors thought the ship would break apart. Jonah slept through it. He had to be woken up. When they cast lots to find out whose fault this was, the lot fell on Jonah, and he told them plainly, "Throw me overboard." He knew. The sea calmed when they threw him in. Then the fish. 3 days in the dark, at the bottom of everything, with no way out that he could arrange for himself. Jonah prayed inside the fish. The prayer is recorded. It is not composed or theological. It is the prayer of someone who has reached the actual bottom. I went down to the roots of the mountains. The earth with her bars closed around me forever. And then, brought up, he was deposited on dry land, told again to go to Nineveh. This time he went. What Jonah adds to this story is something specific. Sometimes the failure is not an accident. Sometimes it is a refusal, a deliberate turn in the wrong direction, eyes open. And the story still continued. David, he was the king. He had been described specifically as a man after God's own heart. He had written psalms about the kind of person he wanted to be. He was not young, not naive, not without experience of what integrity cost. He saw Bathsheba. He sent for her. When the consequences arrived, he tried to manage them. Brought her husband home from the war, hoping the man would sleep with his own wife and the timeline would blur. The husband refused. His men were still in the field, and he would not take comfort while they didn't. So David arranged for Uriah to be placed at the front of the battle and the troops to withdraw. Uriah was killed. The cover was complete. Months later, the prophet Nathan came with a story about a rich man who had many flocks, but stole the one beloved lamb of a poor man. David was outraged. That man deserves to die. Nathan said, "You are the man." David did not argue. He did not construct a defense or produce an explanation. He said, "I have sinned against the Lord." What followed, the consequences, the grief, the loss, was real. The failure was not erased. The damage was not undone. But Psalm 51 came from this moment. Create in me a clean heart, O God. And the line through which the Messiah would come ran through Bathsheba. Not despite the failure. Through it. Three men. Three different kinds of failure. Peter's failure was a failure of nerve. The gap between the person he intended to be and the person who showed up in the courtyard. Jonah's failure was a failure of obedience, knowing exactly what to do and deliberately going the other way. David's failure was a failure of character, using power to take what wasn't his, then using more power to hide it. Three different failures, one pattern. None of them was finished by it. There is a version of this message that rushes past the consequences to reach the comfort. And while it is true that all three stories document restoration, it is not the whole story. David's child died. The consequences of what he did unfolded in his household for years. They are documented. Jonah reached Nineveh. His preaching worked. And then he sat outside the city, angry, still hoping God would destroy it, even after the mission succeeded. The book of Jonah ends with a question God asks him. We don't have his answer. The story closes on an unresolved man. Peter was asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" One question for each denial. The restoration was as specific as the failure, not a general amnesty, a surgical return. The pattern is not that failure has no weight. It is that failure is not the final definition, not the last word about who you are, not the permanent ceiling on what is still possible. So here you are, carrying a specific failure, not a generalized feeling of inadequacy, a specific thing, a moment or a pattern of moments where you did not do what you knew was right, or ran from what you knew you were supposed to do, or looked at yourself afterward and thought, if this is who I am, then what am I? You don't have to minimize it. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to pretend the gap between who you meant to be and what you did isn't there. But hold this, the man who wept in a courtyard became the voice that spoke on Pentecost. The man who booked a ship in the wrong direction eventually stood in Nineveh. The man who arranged a murder wrote the psalm about a clean heart, and it is still being prayed thousands of years later. What you did is not who you are. What you did is not the ceiling of what you can still become. The story is not over. The last chapter hasn't been written, and the person reading this right now, still here, still asking, is evidence that it isn't.